Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're just going to give a quick minute for everyone to continue to filter in. And in the meantime, feel free to take a look at this wonderful slide. Get excited for our industry chat. Okay. All right, so my name is Jenna Quinn, and it's my pleasure as the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement to welcome you all to this edition of our 49er Industry Chat Series. Before we start, I just have a couple of housekeeping items. We want to inform you that the session is being recorded. And so what that means is for you is that it's going to be available on demand at our website at www.csulb.edu/alumni. So feel free to view it whenever you'd like and send it to a friend. And this is a webinar format, so we encourage you all to use the Q&A box to submit questions for our guest speaker. You don't have to wait until the end or anything. Just go ahead and whenever it pops into your head, throw it in the Q&A and we'll get that asked. And so now with that, I'm happy to welcome our guest speaker today, Daro Huot. Hi, Daro.
Jenna, hi. Hi to all viewers. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. So just going to read your bio really quick and then we'll get into things. So Daro is an educational research analyst with the Long Beach Unified School District's Office of Research and School Improvement. Shortly after graduating with his master's in public administration, he began his career at LBUSD and has worked on various initiatives related to district assessment and data accountability. In 2014, he earned his master's in counseling with a Pupil Personnel Services school counseling credential, which continued to shape his research interests and career path towards supporting students' social and emotional needs by leveraging data and student voice through a more humanistic approach. So thanks, Daro, so much for joining us. I believe you have some slides for us. So if you want to go ahead and share those, let's get those up on the screen.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that bio. First of all, as I was listening to it, I hope it's not off-putting because there's so much more to data, and I'll get into that shortly, but different aspects of data and how we leverage and use data to support something so intangible like student wellness or social emotional learning. So I'll go ahead and just start first by connecting with my audience and sharing a little bit more on a personal level. So I prepared a couple of slides. I promise you it's not going to be all about numbers.
Yeah, I think that's sometimes a research analyst and you're like, oh no, what am I getting myself into? But no, we're excited.
Right. Like when I tell people, or when they ask, what do you do? I say, I'm a research analyst for Long Beach Unified. To say, oh, what do you research? Well, there's so much more to that, but I'll get into that a little bit. So I guess I just want to share first of all, my educational journey. And this is something that I share, whenever I have opportunities to present to folks inside the district, to do trainings at school sites or at the district level. I always like to share my educational journey. And for those who are very familiar with Long Beach or have been raised in Long Beach, I'd like to share where first of all, I grew up in Long Beach. I was born in Long Beach. So there's this sense of pride in being raised in Long Beach. Some might say, tongue in cheek, that it's kind of like this incestuous relationship we have in Long Beach where, we just like breed our own. First thing is that I attended Whittier Elementary. It's in the south side of Long Beach. And then I went over to Carberry Elementary in the 4th and 5th grade, and then attended Lindbergh all the way on the other side of Long Beach, attended Poly High School, the PACE program. And then actually, before I started my journey at Cal State Long Beach, I attended LBCC's honors program for a couple of years, and then decided to transfer to Cal State Long Beach and double major in literature and sociology. Finished that in 2005 and decided to go right into my master's in public administration and public policy. And then from there, about 7-year stint as I was continuing to work for Long Beach Unified, I went back for my master's in school counseling and got my credential. So all that to say that, it was a pretty long educational journey, one that's probably not quite over yet. So that's why I wrote maybe PhD. It's something that I've been thinking about for a while, but
Yeah,
obviously there
we
are
have
other,
we have a educational doctorate at CSULB, so
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
there.
yeah. I've been keeping tabs on the ED program. But yeah, just, I share that also because I feel like my experiences in the educational systems here, in the local educational systems, has been so supportive and encouraging in a way that, like, I know that being a lifelong learner, being a student is always going to be part of my identity. So I'll keep you posted if, where I decide to go or if I decide to get my doctorate. But ED's, Cal State Long Beach is definitely top of the list. So then as far as my leadership journey, I share that I started out in education really as a college age. So when I graduated from high school, I went back to my high school and I was a college age where I was tutoring students and helping with providing like supplemental instruction in the classroom. And then when I finished my master's, I got I applied for the associate research analyst position at Long Beach Unified. And obviously I got that position. And then, let's see here. And I also completed a couple of internships at some of our local high schools while I was getting my other master's in counseling. And then I moved on to research analyst one position where I moved away from testing to like data, supporting training using our student information systems. And now currently as a research analyst, I do a lot of just more, I like to say just a more broad scope of work that supports social emotional learning in our students, culture and climate, and in things like surveys, focus groups, empathy interviews, gathering data in just more humanistic ways. So that's it.
Awesome. I don't think we can leave the slide without me asking, what's that picture you have there?
I'm sorry. Yeah. I put that there. Thank you for asking. The window covered it up. So that was when I graduated in 2014. And that's my dad. My dad graduated from Cal State Long Beach, I believe in '86. So, he and my mom escaped the Cambodian genocide and came to the US in, I believe, 1979 or 1980. And my dad was, a really big proponent of higher education. And he worked his way through LBCC as well and transferred to Cal State Long Beach and graduated with his electrical engineering degree while learning English, while learning, the culture and customs of America and raising 3 children at the same time. So I put that there, and I intentionally put this picture because, his education, my education started with his education. So it was just such an honor for me to, and I remember he used to take me to campus too. So I would while he was taking classes, because childcare was not easy,
No.
readily available sometimes. So I'd just hang out on campus with my mom or my siblings, walk around the bookstores and stuff. So it was kind of like a second home for me. And so when I took this picture and I showed it to him, he was just, he was so proud. And, it's hard to describe just the feeling that moment when I got my master's and took that picture. I've always had this picture of him imprinted in my mind. So when I took it and juxtaposed it and shared it with them, he was like, "Oh, it's like the best present ever."
Well, it's really lovely. I mean, we always love having our beach family expanded. And I think that's so just absolutely wonderful that it's something that you and your family share.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, so I'll move on to the next slide. So just a little bit more about myself. Obviously, there's just more to me than my professional identity. So as I shared before, my parents came from Cambodia. I do consider myself Cambodian and Chinese as well. Happy Lunar New Year to all of those in the API community and community advocates. I do have a son who's turning 2 next week, but that's a picture of him to the upper right. His name's Marshall, and that he was Pinocchio for Halloween.
I think the cutest Pinocchio I've ever seen in my life.
Thank you. Yeah, my wife helped make the costume, so pretty amazing. But one of the things we love to instill in our that we want to instill in him and within our family is just a love of nature and to travel, to get out there. So we, in the last 12 months, we were able to, we were fortunate enough to be able to travel to Canada, went to Calgary. There's Central Library down there. Beautiful architecture. We love visiting public libraries, especially the ones that have just such unique architecture and style and design. And then we took our son to Banff National Park. We loved the national parks. Went to Alberta, Canada to visit Peyto Lake, and went to Kauai. And then more recently, I took my son to Palm Springs to go on a small hike to Palm Canyon Trail. So just a little bit more about me as a person.
And hopefully another future alum, right?
Yeah. Okay, so getting back to the purpose of this chat, I do also just want to share a few of the current projects and research interests that I have right now to give you a better sense of the type of work that I'm involved in. And so one of the current projects and interests is how helping us as a district and as a school system, as helping schools to leverage data and student voice to support students' sense of identity, agency, and belonging. The second thing is, and I'm sure you may have heard, SEL, it's no longer a buzzword, but, I was around, I've been in the district for 15 years, and SEL was something that has really quickly emerged as an important aspect of curriculum, as an important aspect of student learning outcomes is social emotional learning. Things like self-efficacy, self-management, or responsibility, or the ability to relate to other people. Those are things that fall under the umbrella of SEL. And so I can say that I'm privileged and lucky to be able to be in a position where I can merge different worlds of research and practicum to support things like SEL using my educational background. And then also another one of my research interests is focusing on sense of belonging among students, especially among our Black student population. So how do we center our most underrepresented student groups in the district, those who have been historically marginalized? Yeah, those are my sort of research interests that kind of shine a light on the things that I currently do.
Awesome, thank you. A comment from one of our audience members was that you have beautiful photos and beautiful family. Hanalei Bay is my favorite beach, and I went there for my honeymoon. So I think
Awesome,
yeah. So I think traveling is something that a lot of people really would love to do and are always hoping to do. And it looks like you're able to get out there and do that a lot. I mean, does that speak to the work-life balance that exists for someone, an educational research analyst? What's the work-life balance like for you?
So work-life balance, that's a good question. I like to think that work-life balance, at least for me personally, I think it gives off the impression that, first of all, I think aspects of work-life balance are a myth. I think sometimes we look at it wrong when we think that that one of the goals is to achieve a work-life balance. So obviously I'm a new father, there's, I love to travel and work is a big part of my life. That's not to say that I need to work towards finding a way where my personal life and my work life do not encroach on each other. That's not possible. I think that it's better to set your focus on achieving work-life harmony. So balance sort of implies there's like, either you're spending your time doing work or focusing on work, or you're spending time focusing on personal life. Again, it's more about harmony, I think, where it's better to like set boundaries where like work and personal life do not encroach on each other, but at the same time, it's unrealistic. So how do I achieve a harmonious relationship between work and personal life? You make sure that you anchor yourself in the right things day to day. I think back to like my last 15 years working here in the district, and I've gone through so much different roles, different projects. No year, no month has ever looked the same. And some months are hectic, some months are a little bit more, less hectic, I'd say. But what that means is, I think as long as you, and that's essential. I think that's an important thing to understand when you're embarking on a career, is to understand that you're always going to have these ebbs and flows and ways of work that may be more challenging or demanding or asking more of you than you ever thought of yourself, and that's okay. As long as you anchor yourself in the things that are most important to you, meaning like for me, family life, understanding that and making sure that you have people like my wife, and it's very supportive of me and always understands that sometimes I might need to check work emails. It's okay, but she understands that I know that there's a boundary to the extent that I'm not going to just check emails just and respond to emails just because I feel like I need to. It's sometimes the reality is sometimes you just check emails or you reply back to messages, knowing that for me, it could be a principal, it could be a counselor who, has a burning question or needs some support. And so I look at my work in terms of being able to support site level employees and answer like quick questions has a huge impact on how they, has a huge impact on their work and obviously a huge impact on the students.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's kind of a long-winded answer.
No, I mean, hey, it's important, right? It's something that a lot of people need to consider, and it sounds like you have a great support system and are able to find that harmony. So that's great. For you, what is I feel like educational research analyst, not everyone has a full grasp of exactly what that means, and that's probably because it's such a versatile and creative role. But what is like a typical day in your line of work? Like what do you do? What's your typical day as an educational research analyst?
That's a good question. Typical day. I'll preface that by saying there's really no typical day, but I'd say because since in a school district, we directly support our schools, and so there are different times of the year that are more demanding, like the opening of the school year, or maybe at the end of the semester where we have to be more hands on deck. So I'd say there really isn't a typical day, and I love that. It could look something like, for me, like in the past week, I've been invited to go out to present to our counselors on using data or understanding how to navigate different dashboards to get survey data like SEL data. It also involves sometimes just interfacing with other district offices on different initiatives and programs, or just collaborating with folks inside our department. Like in the research and school improvement office here, we actually have multiple different teams. So we have our data team, we have our program evaluation team, we have programmers that develop apps for data. And then we also have our EdTech team that directly supports like the use of technology in classrooms. So all of that to say that there's just always a like you never know what comes up sometimes. So it's very atypical. Sorry, that's probably not what you were.
No, it's fine. Something that you're talking about that I kind of um kind of got something going in my head was, you're talking about getting data and using that right for what you do. What kind of data do you get? Where do you get your data? What is it, just surveys, or what do you do to find data to do your job?
So when I say data, and I think for most of us, we think of like numbers, we think of quantitative data, but the reality is data within a school system, or at least in Long Beach Unified, it's about there's just all forms. There's like qualitative and quantitative. We use surveys as one way to gather data on student perceptions and feedback, maybe providing like open-ended questions. Data is also gathered in ways like through empathy interviews, one-on-one interviews. So one of the things I do besides like helping to co-construct surveys with students is to I also help conduct student focus groups. So I go out to schools and list and host listening sessions on how students feel, how they feel as students, hearing about their lived experiences, anecdotes. All those things are different forms of data that we use to, I think, inform our daily practices. Again, just anecdotes, which stories, observations, case studies, in addition to survey data. Survey data is just one type of data. So I can tell you, for example, we administer like 3 different pulse surveys a year. I'm proud to say that that's something that we co-constructed with our students. So we asked students on the survey, our superintendent actually commissioned a student advisory group where we asked those student representatives, and we said, hey, we'd like to measure sense of identity, sense of belonging, sense of agency, and we need your help to construct questions on the survey so that when students take these surveys, they're hearing other students asking these questions, not necessarily just people in an office. So that's taking a more humanistic approach and making sure that students are central in every single aspect of that process of not just constructing the surveys or the questions, but also helping to prioritize questions, because building surveys is very scientific, in terms of like validity and reliability. But we also need to make sure that we're just not doing it in a vacuum. We need to make sure that students are, again, feeling that they are partners in this whole process of survey design, building surveys, administering surveys, so that there's ownership across all the schools. And then what our superintendent, Dr. Joe Baker, does is she actually looks at the data, the pulse survey data, and she's been going out to the schools, meeting with 20 to 25 kids at lunchtime at various schools and bringing the data with her to say, hey, what are your inferences? What are your thoughts on this data, that reflect you as students? So it's a very different way of, I think, collecting data as opposed to like just giving a survey, collecting the data and making inferences in a vacuum. It's more about involving the stakeholder groups and making sure they are validated, that their sense of identity, agency, and belonging is actualized at every aspect of the process. Sorry, now it's probably, again, a little long-winded and technical, but I hope that does give our viewers a sense of just how we are shifting our focus in terms of connecting with our students, because at the end of the day, in education, it's all about, the bottom line is the education of our kids, the well-being of our kids. And so when you keep that in mind, that framework in mind and that purpose, then I think for me anyways, it shifts the way that I approach my work as an analyst. It's not about just hard data, it's about qualitative data, student voice. And yeah, and relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think that I thought about like the superintendent coming to schools and having lunch with the kids and talking to them about it. Um, I mean, is that very different than, because you are a product of LBUSD and you went to several LBUSD schools. Do you feel like you have some kind of insight? Do you feel like I wish I would have I wish I could have been a part of this when I was a kid, or were you a part of that kind of stuff when you were going through school? Do you feel like you have some kind of insight because you are a product of LBUSD?
Absolutely. I think like any student here, I think my lived experiences inform the work I do and how I approach it. But as a student in the system, a couple decades ago, or
we won't say it's fine.
but yeah, I don't recall. I don't recall actually taking surveys that asked me at different points of my year, like how I was feeling, or if I needed to talk to someone about how I was feeling. But that's not to say that social emotional learning was not actually occurring, like when you and I were attending school in the K-12 system. It's occurring every single day. It's just now we are shedding light on the fact that, yes, we are learning in our class, we're learning academics in a classroom, but the reality is we're also learning even before SEL was around, or that we even, gave it a label. We were learning about grit, about perseverance. We were learning about social responsibility. We were learning about how to relate to others coming from different backgrounds. So I say that because it has been around for a long time. But now that I'm more versed in this area, and I know what it looks like, what it feels like, what it sounds like, social emotional learning, and having a sense of like agency, identity, and belonging. It's now to have a sense of it, like, I'm just glad to be leading part of this effort and making sure that it is like part of our basic education in the system.
Yeah.
It's definitely not going away. It might sound different, it might look different, it might have a different name, but social emotional learning, is important. It's a life skill. I think even you and I, when it comes down to our sense of agency, belonging, identity, or SEL skills like self-efficacy, grit, perseverance, we're still learning those things. We're still working on those skills as adults.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, at every phase of our life. So it's great that we're helping students to identify those now, and to be able to be more attuned to those skills.
Absolutely. A question from the audience actually came in. So, can you share any examples of what outcomes have been made possible from your findings, or perhaps findings of yours that sound most fascinating?
Absolutely. So I mentioned helping to facilitate Black student focus groups at some of our, and we've been doing that at some of our middle and high schools, where we found, looking at data, looking at the student voices that have been shared, that our Black students have expressed higher senses of belonging, agency, and identity. So we've gone out to these schools to interview students and hear what it is that's contributing to that. So we're seeing that those are huge celebrations that we've been having in the district. Some other findings, so I mentioned a pulse survey. We give that 3 times a year. We just concluded with the winter pulse survey, and we'll have one in the spring. Some of our findings so far has been that from the fall to spring, from September to December, students' sense of agency, belonging, and identity across our schools has been very stable. You look at things like there could be fluctuations, like in terms of like plus or minus 1 or 2 percentage points, And I can get more into what that really means. But what it is telling us is that schools are heavily invested in students learning in a holistic approach of student learning. We're obviously still very invested in student achievement in terms of like testing. We have there are a lot of, we develop our own district assessments around like language arts or reading, math. We also have our state assessments. We have, I'm sure you recall in your time as a student, all the tests that you've taken. So we're still invested in making sure that we have the right metrics to know how we are doing as a district and how well students are learning. But yeah, once again, we're just very invested in student social emotional skills. So the pulse survey, some of the survey data has shown is that our district is heading in the right direction. We still have a long way to go, a very long way, I feel, but we're asking the right questions now, and obviously there's still room for improvement, but we're heading in the right direction.
Right. Yeah. So, this is a question that we always ask across the industry, whoever we're talking to. We always ask them this, and because it's pretty obvious, but I feel like for your work, it's particularly salient. How has COVID impacted the work that you're doing, and just the landscape in general, and what changes have you seen, and how is it impacting?
I think it's impacted almost every facet of education, and as much as it's impacted every facet of our lives. What it's done for sure is, I think back to the last couple of years now and how crazy that it was, but how much more it's brought to light inequities in our system and things that we can do to be better. I think about things in education that people didn't realize that we're actually addressing in public education. If you think about any industry, you think about all the different industries out there, and you compare it to education, like education actually squarely addresses a lot of social issues. And I don't think there's any, and you can check out our board of education meetings and the folks that come out to talk. We address things obviously like COVID-19, like we had our own tracking system. So I mean, in education, in school systems, we address not just academics, we address communicable diseases, we address racial justice, we address health and safety. We address a lot of things that are, I guess you can say, are highly politicized in education. There's not any topic, I feel like, that isn't openly addressed in education, in public education. So another, for example, gender equity, inclusion, diversity, all those things that I think as a society that we've been facing, we definitely have been facing as a school system as well. Food insecurities, we have students who are foster students who are homeless, and so, or have nutrition insecurities or food insecurities. So we address all those things through our students who are dealing with so many wide range of social issues. So you think about education as that type of industry. I don't know if there's any other industry that addresses so many things at once, while making sure that once our students leave the system, that they are prepared for, that they have the skill sets to go for what they want to do in terms of college or career. So many things at once.
Yeah, someone wrote in and said, with the data you collect, are there programs or services that you offer students? So, right, so I mean, you collect this data, you read the numbers, and some students are making great strides and some are struggling. So is that, is there something at the end of that?
Absolutely, yeah. There's so many things at the end of that, but I can tell you that just from the survey alone, and just how it's used across our district, it allows us to connect students with, so let me go back one step. I could tell you that on our survey, we actually asked students, and students are free to skip any questions they want or opt out of these surveys. So they're optional, but we're proud to say that we have, from our last survey, we had over 76% of our kids take it, which is like over 35,000 kids. So it's incredible. And so one of the questions that we ask at the end of the survey is, would you like to speak to someone privately? Would you like to speak with someone privately from school about how you're feeling or what's on your mind? So what that question is getting at is, like, if you're dealing with something, if you're dealing with a lot of stress or things at home or things at school that you just need to talk to someone about, whether it's a social worker or a counselor or an administrator, or a psychologist, like, this survey allows us to quickly give students another way of reaching out to say, hey, I need help, and to do it discreetly and safely. And so I'm proud to say that we've actually been able to connect many of our kids who've probably never even spoken to someone about maybe something that's going on in their life or how they're feeling. Now they know they can turn to someone, a teacher or a trusted adult at school, or maybe they've been connected to community resources, especially like if they have suicidal ideation. I mean, that's a reality that impacts our youth too. So through this work, we've been able to connect our students to more resources, connect them with other folks at school sites. And then another impact I think it has is that, and my hope is that for those who just feel like, who are just very dismissive of what they're going through, especially if they're going through a dark time in their lives or something, we just hope that they have a positive experience after having connected with someone at school, that somewhere down the road, if they ever are feeling like they're in trouble again, or they just need to talk to someone, that they are willing to do that. Because we know that those that don't reach out, and I'm speaking now more from my counseling background, the hope is that you have a positive experience where you can connect with someone to talk about what's troubling you, so that you're more likely to do it next time, and that you don't feel alone when you are going through something difficult.
Awesome.
So the survey and so many of the things we do to collect data, to connect with students, to make sure that we keep students front and center, it doesn't, and I can speak from not just my role, but just from the roles in our entire district, from our administrators to our principals, counselors, our teachers. We all sort of play that counseling role in that we look at this data, we listen to student voices to validate it. We do it to make sure that we are ensuring that we are listening to students authentically and genuinely. And that's why I shared how Dr. Baker, she goes back, she looks at the data, not to just, she looks at the data, not to just quickly make inferences on it, but to go back and bring it back to the students to say, hey, is this how you're feeling? Is this really, are we asking the right questions? Are these what you feel like are the priorities, in your lives or with you and your students? Are we doing this right? So something we continue to ask ourselves all the time.
So for people, I mean, you were kind of saying about how everyone kind of plays the counselor. But for folks who are maybe looking to go into this line of work, what are some of the most important qualities that someone should have if they're looking to be an educational analyst?
The important qualities to being an educational analyst, I can see that, even with my other analyst colleagues, like, we all have a pretty diverse background, actually. But I think maybe some of the prerequisites to that is you just have to really care about students and feel a genuine connection to students, because it doesn't matter what role you occupy in the district. Like, if you're not really in it for the kids, then it may not, be the best opportunity for you. And I can say that as a research analyst, I work in an office space, but it doesn't necessarily deter me from saying that, because I know, because I'm, again, I'm always great. I have the opportunity to actually continue to go out to schools, connect with students. It's not just this very cut and dry process with collecting data. It's a very personal, it's a very open process. Again, as long as you make sure that your stakeholder group, your primary stakeholders are your students. But that being said, yes, there is, you definitely want to have, you should have, an interest in data. For me, that came about when I, majored in sociology, and then it naturally led me to have a curiosity in understanding how to address social issues that I've learned about in sociologies, and that's why that's why I went into public policy and administration, because I knew at that point, at least, that I wanted to go into public service. I also thought I wanted to go to law school, but then thankfully I met a professor in the MPA program who was a lawyer too, who deterred me from going that route, given just what my interests were at the time. So I think, yeah, I just have to have at least an interest, if not a passion, in things like social change, in restorative justice, having a passion for the youth.
Right. So if for those who are still, maybe they're still trying to figure out what they want to do, or they're trying to figure out, do I want to be a teacher or maybe not? But for folks who are interested in educational assessment, what advice do you have for them?
For those who have an interest in educational assessment, let me think about that one. I mean, I can share a little bit more about my thoughts about anyone who just wants to get into education in general, because I realize I've always had an interest in education or public education. And I think most people think that, okay, naturally, then you're going to want to be a teacher.
Right.
I wasn't going to be a good teacher. But here in Long Beach Unified, we are the largest employer in the city of Long Beach. And if you think about the school system, we employ so many, we have, there's so many different departments, from, facilities and planning to technology to IT to curriculum, teacher professional development, nutrition. There's so many different things that it's almost like a macrocosm. The school district is kind of a macrocosm of any little city. And we so many of us occupy those types of roles and responsibilities to make sure that this macrocosm runs very well. So but what sets us apart, I think, is, again, just our dedication to our students, and a belief that we need to invest in our kids. So, we have, if you're interested in just working in education, or you're just interested in working things like accounting or finance, or even, doing custodial work, come to education, come to Long Beach Unified, or look in your local school districts, because at least that you're doing it's a very noble cause. At least there's a clear connection to what you do and the people you serve, the communities you serve, your students, the families. And not to knock any other professions that maybe their bottom lines are a little different. Even if they have a social cause, the bottom line is maybe profit margins. Here, the bottom line in education is education. So at least so that's what makes me feel so proud to be here. And again, there are just so many different opportunities that you can, work opportunities that speak to so many different interests. across different industries in the school district. So I definitely implore people to just check out, like, it's called edjoin.org, and that's where most school districts post positions. They're classified and certificated. And then look at what kind of opportunities that each district has in terms of professional development. So in Long Beach Unified, we have, I think, over 16 different leadership pipelines. We have programs for classified and certificated employees, like teachers who maybe want to move up to being an administrator or being, there's so many different types of positions. But they also have that for classified folks like myself, so that there is opportunities for mobility and to continue to seek out your interests or your passions, because not everyone knows what their passion is at times. Sometimes you just kind of figure it out as you go along.
Let's go with the flow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, so Alana went ahead and put that in the chat for everyone, that website that you recommended. I want to thank you so much for your time today. It has been a truly wonderful chat, and I think a lot of people got a lot out of this. And I think all the questions that we had come through was a good testament to that. But Daro, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you and maybe ask you some questions or pick your brain, would they be able to do that? And how might they be able to do that?
Yeah, by all means, I can leave my email. It's the first letter D, and then my last name, HUOT, at lbschools.net. So it's DHUOT at lbschools.net. Yeah, I'd love to hear from anyone that has any follow-up questions or wants to continue this conversation, this chat. Again, I was sort of reluctant to, and I told you this earlier before we went live, but when I shared this opportunity across my social personal networks and stuff, I had friends that were like, I had no idea you were in education. I had no idea you had a counseling. I had no idea you did this type of work, social emotional learning. It's so amazing. And it made me realize that I think we, as a society, maybe need to think about shifting our focus and how we talk about our passions and things we do. I think sometimes we think it's sort of taboo to talk about our profession or to ask someone, so what do you do? Because maybe they feel like someone's trying to measure them or size them up or assess like their self-worth in society because they might have a bigger title or a bigger pay. I think we need to move away from that. You should feel happy and proud to talk about something you do in your professional life and share it with anyone who's interested in wanting to hear about it. You should, because if you don't feel like you are motivated or have a sense of pride in talking about what you do in your work, then maybe that's telling you something. So, continue to seek out what those interests and passions are. Find something that, my advice is find something that you are proud and happy to share about in your personal networks. And so thank you again for this opportunity.
Yeah, awesome closing advice. And thank you so much. If you could stay online with us and while everybody else filters out, I would appreciate that. But thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll catch you next time at the next industry chat. Bye.